Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's Partner Showcase series with Beltrees Consulting Services. With me is Traci Nichols. She's the head of procurement delivery at Beltrees. So I'll turn it over to Traci, let her introduce Beltrees and herself.
Thank you very much, Drew. Let me share my screen. So as mentioned in the wonderful intro, my name is Traci Nichols, and I am a partner and also the head of digital procurement delivery at Beltrees Consulting. We've been in business for just about 4 years, since 2018, and our whole goal with building Beltrees Consulting is to fix any of the things that we used to experience when we were practitioners. So myself and my partner, Chet Tapp, we are both procurement practitioners as well as consultants. And as practitioners, we've noticed that there's some things that probably could go a little bit better and be more of value to all of our customers and clients. Right here, you can see we have our service offerings. Everything that we do is specific to procurement. We don't wander off into any other areas. Procurement is what we know and what we excel in. We differentiate ourselves by having very creative commercial options. So because we are a growing business, we don't have as much of the overhead, but we do have access to the best subject matter experts in the field. Majority of our subject matter experts that are specific in procurement and have been practitioners have an average of 20 years or more of experience. This also includes those consultants that we have with us that focus on analyst activities as well as supplier enablement. Ultimately, we're not as well known as some of the other players, but what we pride ourselves in is that our customers are our success. So we have to make sure that we deliver and that we do the best that we can, if not more, in order to make sure that your success is our success. And that's how we gain internal brand equity. So today we're going to focus on a variety of areas within the Beltrees source to pay life cycle. And this is our methodology, which is very similar to everyone else's. However, our biggest point in all of this is, yes, we can have each piece of the puzzle be linked together, but if the data is not consistent and if it's not in a good, functional, clean aspect, you're going to have problems with your implementations as well as post-implementation as you continue your journey through your procurement evolution. So, Drew, I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect. Traci, thank you so much for the background about Beltrees and some little more about yourself. But for everyone tuning in, like Traci said, the main topic for today's discussion will be through the full procurement journey. So to start, I know Traci briefly mentioned the need for clean data, but before that, what does the adoption of procurement software look like? What are some challenges you've seen with companies trying to adopt procurement software? So if you can talk through that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So with every client, there's no typical scenario. So when we go into our new clients and they are looking to transform or evolve their procurement platforms or processes, we need to make sure that there's readiness within their organization. So understanding that there's appropriate skill sets, understanding what you really want out of a solution is really the biggest key point that you have to do. Is your data ready? Do you have the resources that are available? Do you know what you're looking for? There's a lot of times people have heard of specific platforms or technologies that they're wanting to use. However, they may not know the right questions to ask. And every platform and every technology will be able to serve your needs in one way or another, but it's based on what your culture and what your organizational need is that is really super important. So we always try to make sure that we have a really good definition in place with full alignment with executive leadership in order to be able to take the first step into transforming and implementing a software. This will allow us to make really good decisions, some smart decisions where we can change process, where we need to add additional value through training or any other expertise, or maybe you even need to have potentially a restructure of your organization. Might not be structured in a manner where the process works the way that it should. Once you've done that, it's always important to get buy-in. So socialize, socialize, socialize. If a platform or a technology is getting ready to be implemented and no one knows about it, and everyone is thinking, oh, we're going to get the system, I'm not sure how I'm going to use it. Well, if you keep them engaged and have them understand what's going to happen, your adoption rate will go up. It'll allow for people to have a little bit of input and say, oh, this change isn't quite so scary. And in addition to that, as you're going through the process, you just continue to communicate and let people see what it's going to look like, so they can really start getting excited about their new experience. I know I was very nervous the first time I was going on to, back in the day, Netscape, trying to look at something that we now just simply Google, or going onto Amazon and trying to order for the first time, wondering if it was safe. We all do this stuff all day long. So procurement technology is no different. It's just the way that you're presenting it and making sure that your organization is ready.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. And I guess to go into the next topic as well, we talked about having clean data in order to adopt your procurement software and have that readiness. So where does the data transformation play into this adoption piece? And where have you seen some companies fall short with that?
Absolutely. So there are several components that are really critical, we feel, for any procurement software implementation. Obviously, we were talking about organizational readiness, but also project planning and design, making sure you select the right software, planning for project management. That's very important. But change management, ongoing governance, all of this is driven by the data. So if the data isn't clean, you're going to have a much harder time trying, one, to get adoption, and two, to be able to actually use that data in a fashion that's going to be able to allow the automation and the system to be able to do what it's supposed to do. If there's a component, say, for example, as user data, when we look at the users, and something that you want to do first is really look at the user data. What access do people need? What do they need to see? If you're in an organization that does, say, pharmaceuticals or in the medical industry, there's going to be privacy laws where you can't really share all of the information, or shouldn't be sharing all of the information about some of the projects or the clinicals that are going on. There might be some sensitive information. This is used a lot in HR for making sure that employees aren't necessarily seeing compensation of other employees, or maybe temporary labor. Another piece that people forget about is, even from a master data perspective, the data is really, it's the plug-in, it's the information. And so, say, for example, the chart of accounts, if you have very complex chart of accounts and the way your end users need to code their requisitions, or even if they don't have a PO, have invoices, the coding piece can get really complicated. And for an end user to know every single segment and how it's supposed to tie and where it's supposed to go, that's not user friendly. We pop in our credit cards very easily, or PayPal or Apple Pay, when we go to Amazon or any of the other online stores. So why can't it be something that can be saved, auto-saved, uploaded? It's already there. Let's make sure it's clean. We know what works together, and that is a critical component for any of the journeys.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. So I guess going through that, you talked about the implementation process and all the key, pieces you need in order to go through that. But can you expand upon that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So we typically go in and, of course, the organizational readiness, this all builds upon each other, right? The data transformation is really part of is key, but there's other areas where we need to make sure that we fully understand when we go through implementation. There's human nature, resistance to change. We discussed that. Making sure you have a comprehensive change management plan and a really good training plan. Yes, when our iPhones are getting updated, we don't have to go and have a training session and we just sort of figure it out. But there are people, we have multiple generations that are working. Some people are more savvy than others, and there are people that take the learnings in a very different way, whether you need to touch it or if you're better at listening or seeing. So we try to make sure we take that into consideration. Planning with reality is also very important. So every time I walk into a client and I hear, we have to be live by December 31st, 2022. It's very difficult to do that, especially knowing that the majority of organizations out there tend to take some time off between Thanksgiving and Christmas time or the holidays, and they tend to use up their vacation at the end of the year. So that's a month and a half that's outside of our control because people are not going to be on the project. You'll have some gaps. So when you're planning something out, it's great to have a target, but the realization is set good expectations. Think about those things to keep your people from having change fatigue, allowing them to take their vacations. That also plays into the change management piece. You'll get a much bigger user adoption if you are looking at that kind of stuff. That's really important to people instead of just working all day long.
Right, of course. And I guess the next topic is sort of goes off of this as well too. But how can an organization's, I guess, resistance to change affect their decision making when it comes to adopting their procurement software? I know you touched upon it with having specific go live dates, using these same processes, and some just don't have the bandwidth. But how would that affect the procurement software adoption as well?
That's a great question. We're talking a lot more today as the platforms and the technology evolves, and we hear a lot more about artificial intelligence or machine learning. So I'm going to try to relate the soft part of this, of change management, to the technical part. When you think about changing and you've known a process for a really long time and you've known how to use this technology, and it's like the back of your head, you don't need to look up anything. Once in a great while, you might come into something you aren't familiar with, but from the most part, it's standard operating procedure, day-to-day, business as usual. You could do that sort of like washing dishes. However, when there's change in a process, obviously you have to learn something different. And that's where the struggle and the resistance to change comes in. Right. So understanding why it's changing, what's the need for this transition and this change is really critical. So we've gone from washing dishes by hand, which people still do, to using a dishwasher. So we've gone through that transition. Why? Because it's faster, it's easier. You don't have to spend as much time doing that. So when I translate that over to artificial intelligence and machine learning, this also ties back to the data. And if the data is not good in your system currently, and you are embarking upon artificial intelligence, the technology is only going to continue to learn all of the bad data that you have and not be able to improve upon it. So it's not going to be able to say, hey, wait a second, you've got 3 suppliers that are doing the same thing. It's going to say, oh, you have 3 suppliers, but they're not really the same because there's a space in between 2 of the words in their name. It's the same thing, but we have to understand the why. So that's where the why comes into the data piece. Bad data in, bad data out.
We hear that all the time too here at Xeeva. Thank you for the answer with that, Traci. Going into our last and final topic, how could you help a company achieve ROI after platform selection? So I know we talked about different companies either being resistant to change, having different bandwidths as well, being on different routes throughout the procurement journey. But how does specific platform selection come into play?
That's really important. The first step is understanding really what is going to be your lower hanging fruit or least resistance to change within the population. There's a theory that says if you can control whatever that change is going to be into a smaller group, so say a pilot group, you'll be able to work through some of those kinks and get to be able to learn, what's working, what's not, and make some adjustments only to be able to improve it further. So whether it be user adoption capabilities, getting additional training, but also by achieving an additional ROI is really dedicating time to things like supplier enablement,
Right.
And to rationalization of your suppliers in order to be able to leverage your spend. You may be buying the same Q-tips from 3 different suppliers, and you could buy, and they all have the same specifications. You'll now have the data to be able to say, hey, I can start saving some money or get a better lead time, if you will, or a better quality of product by being able to see all of the data. In addition to that, there's always a grace period, I would say, between your original go live and a couple years in the future. And I'll just call it a couple years in the future because everybody's organization changes over time. And it's the organizational culture that determines whether or not you're going to change fast and continue to evolve and add on more functionality and do more things, or if your culture is a little bit slower to adopt some of the changes. So we take some baby steps. And what's good is to have, for example, Beltrees Consulting, we go in and take an assessment and say, hey, this is great for what your organization was structured like previously, and you're doing what you're doing and you're following the process. That's the first step. How can we make you more automated? How can we make you more efficient? What can we help you with in order to get more collaboration with your suppliers, get more transactional interaction with your suppliers, having them understand your policies and your procedures for being able to transact with your suppliers. Simply building an external website with that information is a very good way to stop a lot of the phone calls. So what we do is we focus on all of the other outlier pieces that are part of the overall life cycle, procurement life cycle ecosystem, and say, how can we improve even in these other areas that may not be specific to the platform or the technology that you're putting into place?
Traci, thank you for talking through the change management piece. I know that's a huge issue in some of the organizations seen today. Again, thank you for taking the time to walk through Beltrees' capabilities, the importance of adopting a procurement software, where companies fall short, and how companies can avoid doing so. Obviously, the importance of data transformation, clean data, garbage in versus garbage out, what that looks like, and just walking through the entire procurement journey. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you next time.